Welcome to Save As Ability, a podcast to educate and inform you about disability employment issues. My name is David D'Arcangelo, and I'm your disability policy expert.
An overview of the income situation for people with disabilities. That's the topic of today's Save As Ability. Welcome back. It's David D'Arcangelo for another episode. Hope you're doing well out there, and if you could continue to help us grow the channel, like, subscribe, share, comment, so we can keep great content flowing for you. So today we're talking about the income situation of people with disabilities. And what I've done is annually, many agencies and organizations come out with reports, data, and really they're the sources of good information for the employment situation for people with disabilities and the subsequent income situation of people with disabilities. And there's three main sources that we're going to be talking about today or from today. The first one is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS. They produce a report called Persons with a Disability Labor Force Characteristics. Okay, and that's based on 2022 numbers. With all these reports, there's a little bit of a lag in terms of the time that they collect the data and then process the data and then report on the data. So that's for up until calendar year 2022. The next is the annual Disability Statistics Compendium put out by the Kessler Foundation and University of New Hampshire Disability. And the third is the Social Security Administration, their annual statistical report on Social Security programs. So particularly SSI and SSDI. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So we'll get right into it. So some key takeaways from these reports, like key income figures, median weekly earnings for full-time wage salary workers with a disability, about $1,000, okay? Median weekly earnings for full-time wage for salary workers without a disability, about $1,300. So you can see there's a gap there. There's a little bit over a $300 gap in those two numbers. And that really averages to workers with a disability earning about 77% that of what their non-disabled peers earn. Okay. So if a person without a disability is making $1, the person with a disability is making 77 cents. Okay. Just about there. And that's indicated in the report. So another thing, and this is out of the annual Disability Statistics Compendium, is that median earnings for working age people with disabilities, that's 16 to 64, was approximately 25 to 28,000. That's like a nationwide aggregate. So depending upon which state you're in, different other factors like, senior employees are, probably different than. So when you average it all out, the median there's a range there of 25 to 28,000. The median earnings for working age people without disabilities, again, so we're now doing people with and people without disabilities, the range is 35,000 to 40,000. So you can see there's a gap there of about $10,000 on the low end and about $12,000 on the high end of between people with and without disabilities. Okay. So you can see the disparity there as well, that people with disabilities are earning less median wages yearly. And that jives with the first report that we've gotten from the Bureau of Labor Statistics as well. And then next we have the Social Security Administration data points, and they're talking about working age people with disabilities, with significant disabilities. These are people that are relying on SSDI, so that's Social Security Disability Insurance, and that the average SSDI monthly benefit was around $1,300 to $1,400. That figure varies based on past earnings and other factors. We've talked about that in previous episodes, how SSDI is a pay-in program. So you have to have a previous work history and things like that, and quarters in and everything. All right. Well, anyways, what does this all mean? There's a few takeaways. The first one is that there is an income gap, and that income gap between people with and without disabilities remains significant. Okay. Despite many efforts, legislative efforts, the ADA and all these programs that have been set up through Social Security and all the other benefit programs, median earnings for full-time workers with disabilities trail those for workers without disabilities by roughly somewhere between 20 and 25%. Okay. That's an issue. The other thing is that the wage gap contributes to higher poverty rates and financial instability among people with disabilities, because really the SSDI payments really have not kept up. And they're like, how can you live off of that a month if that's your sole source of main income there? So, that's a problem. Number two problem, and the thing that I'm always talking about, and we've talked about many times episodes here, is the labor force participation, and particularly the labor force participation rate. It's one thing to be unemployed, but if you're unemployed, at least you are in the labor force. Too many people with disabilities, somewhere around that 2/3 number that we've talked about, it varies, it'll go as low as 60, it'll go as high as closer to 70% of people, working age people with disabilities, are not in the labor force. And that means that people with disabilities are more likely to be underemployed, unemployed, all of the other things that come with low labor participation rates. And really the net from that is that there's lower overall income, and that's problematic. It's problematic because it reduces or inhibits your ability to be independent and self-determined, because you're reliant on these programs that really are not providing the dollars you need to be able to be, fully independent, fully self-determined. We'll give you an example. For example, in 2022, the labor force participation rate for people with disabilities was around 23.1%. This remains significantly lower than people without a disability, which is around 68.5%. So you can see that gap there. Actually, you shouldn't even call it a gap. You should call it a chasm. I mean, that's like 45 points off. So these fewer hours worked often translate into lower annual earnings as well. So it's like kind of like a double whammy there when you think about it. Right. So that's the number 2 point. The number 3 point is really like the reliance on these disability benefits. It puts you in like this cycle, and it presents this fiscal cliff to you. It's like, okay, why do I want to go and work at a minimum wage job, or a job that's, even if it's above minimum wage, if it's, an $18 an hour wage, why do I want to do that when I can get these public benefits that will take care of my health care, my housing, and my food, and, cash benefits and all these other programs that will, at the end of the day, maybe, air quotes, pay me more or provide me more, right? So that's something that we've really got to try to fix and address, okay? Because many working age individuals with disabilities, particularly those with severe disabilities and people who have, and that's not my word, by the way, that's in the data, with very significant disabilities. How's about that? People who are receiving SSDI and SSI, these benefits, they can't really fully replace a good full-time private wage, or, wage that you're making that is competitive and, in the economy and everything. So that it widens the income gap, I guess, is the point. And that's problematic. So, what's the role here? Like, what can we do? Well, all right, so there's government policy, and there's a legitimate debate there about what is and is not appropriate, to what extent should government get involved, and what types of interventions. We're not having that debate here, but just to point out that, much of this is driven by the public benefits one way or the other. Okay. So state, federal policies, even local policies sometimes, there's been all these programs, whether it's Ticket to Work, Medicaid has their programs, and, there's VR we've talked about, and other things. But the data indicates that often these programs and policies are falling short. I mean, the data, like, we wouldn't have 2/3 of working age people with disabilities not in the labor force if these programs were working perfectly, if they were, scaled to be able to address it. And by the way, I don't think the answer is, well, let's just put more money into the programs. No, the programs aren't performing well enough to justify putting more money in. Like, that's crazy. I would rather just give the money directly to people with disabilities at that point, right? So anyways, that's a different debate for a different day, but just to point out that those challenges exist. And if it was easy to solve for, it would have been done by now. This is complex in a way, because you have people who are born with disabilities, you have many more who are aging into disabilities, and there's a lot in between. So, we've been clear on this. The key to having people be independent, self-determined, is really having them be able to provide for themselves using their talent, using their ability, and not be reliant on these government programs. Are the government programs a piece to the puzzle? Yeah, probably, but they can't be the whole thing. If they're the whole thing, it doesn't really, it's proven over time. Don't believe me. The data indicates it that it's really not enough. That all these problems that we're having with income gaps and low income and all that stuff, it's not really going to get you there. So, there's people that say that strengthening the programs are the way to do it, and, do that by enforcing ADA requirements and, things like that. So some want to establish on the other end completely new things and just going into, I think it's better to look at what's worked. And what's worked. We've had a lot of public-private partnerships that we can point to that have worked. Now, granted, they're on a smaller scale. So how now do you enlarge that to be able to get it out to a larger scale of people with disabilities? But to me, it starts with what can we do to incentivize it for employers of all kinds, by the way, public employers, private employers, all different sectors and industries. What can we do to increase the number and amount of employers who will adopt the strategies that we know on small levels have worked that will drive employment of people with disabilities, that will increase employment rates and participation and see wages rise, so that we can bring out all the talents and abilities in people with disabilities that we know are there. We've talked about it. So, there's some common denominators here, and that's things like, embracing universal design, work arrangements that suit people with disabilities, and making sure that reasonable accommodations are not the exception, but the rule. And, all of this can really help drive this innovation because these programs need to be modernized. And, it's clear the economic benefits, we've cited studies and we've had episodes about the benefits of including people with disabilities, and research shows that increasing employment among people with disabilities is going to help the employer. It's going to help the employee. It's a win-win-win when done well. And, it'll increase GDP and, all kinds of good things happen when we get people employed. So it's complex, but just to wrap up here, the income of working age people with disabilities remains consistently lower than that of their non-disabled peers. It's because of multiple factors: lower labor force participation, wage disparities, reliance on these benefits that are really, haven't been modernized. So the good news is that with new leadership, we can address these challenges and we can modernize these outdated systems, policies, programs to benefit our people. I really believe that's coming. And I really believe there's a way, because we've heard from industry. They're like, we want your talent. And there's plenty of talent in that gigantic pool of people with disabilities that we just got to figure out a way to be able to incentivize it for the people with disabilities, for the employers. And that's going to help everybody. The rising tide's going to lift all ships. So yeah, that's the latest situation. There are gaps, but we're working on it. We appreciate you. Stay positive out there. It's David D'Arcangelo, another episode of Save Visibility. And I hope you have a great day.
For more information about disability employment issues, please visit our website, disabilityemploymentsolutions.com. The Save As Ability podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, our YouTube channel at Disability Policy Expert, or wherever you stream your podcasts. Subscribe, stream, rate, and review our shows. Your ratings and reviews help our show reach new audiences. Produced by Pod Pro Entertainment. Save As Ability lives within a network of podcasts located at podproentertainment.com. #TheNewRadio. Again, my name is David D'Arcangelo, and I'm your disability policy expert. Until next time, thank you. I hope you have a great day.